What would you do if you discovered that the very people you trusted the most were secretly betraying you right inside the company you built with your own hands? That night, the dim golden light in the large office cast a soft glow across the contemplative face of Ethan Grayson, a man respected throughout the city for his vast fortune and his journey from nothing to becoming a business titan. But at that moment, he was no longer the calm and collected chairman everyone knew. He looked more like a father watching his beloved child slowly being destroyed. On the desk, stacks of financial reports were spread wide open, their cold numbers telling an unsettling story. Revenue remained stable, even slightly higher than in previous months. Yet profits had mysteriously evaporated. This wasn't some random fluctuation. It felt deliberate, as if someone had been siphoning off money day by day, using methods so subtle they were nearly invisible. Ethan took a deep breath, his fingers slowly tracing the columns of figures as if searching for a crack in the numbers. But the longer he stared, the more certain he became. Someone had betrayed him right within the empire he had built. Ethan was not the kind of man to blindly trust empty excuses. For nearly 30 years, he had built Grayson Tools from a tiny hardware store with nothing more than a few rusty shelves and an unshakable belief that honesty is the greatest asset. He had once personally wiped dust off every shelf and shook hands with customers with a genuine smile. The people who worked beside him, the long-time employees, had always been like family to him. But now, as he stared at the numbers that betrayed that trust, his heart felt unbearably heavy. Outside the window, the city lay quiet under the blanket of night, the faint glow of streetlights reflecting on the glass. Ethan closed his eyes for a few seconds, but when he opened them again, his gaze had turned sharper than ever. One thought struck him. There was no more room for doubt. He had to find the answers himself. He could no longer let sweet managerial reports or convenient excuses about rising costs blind him for another day. That night, Ethan carefully folded the reports, placed them neatly in the drawer, and made a decision he knew would change everything. He would disguise himself as an ordinary customer and walk into the flagship store of his company, the one he had trusted the most. This wasn't just an investigation. It was a gamble with his own faith in the very people he had once considered family. And in that moment, sitting alone in the room, bathed in warm golden light, Ethan whispered softly, almost as if speaking directly to the traitors secretly draining his profits. "You think I never check, don't you? Then wait and see." The next morning, the sky was draped in a pale grey, and weak sunlight filtered through the tall buildings, reflecting off the glass facade of the main Grayson Tools branch. Ethan stood in front of the large glass doors, looking every bit like an ordinary worker who had just come from a construction site. His clothes were dusted with paint, the shoulders of his jacket were worn thin, the brim of his cap was pulled low, almost covering half his face, and his old scuffed work boots completed the disguise. To anyone passing by, he was just another laborer stopping in for supplies, not the man who had poured millions of dollars into making this one of the most trusted hardware brands in the region. The glass door swung open, and the familiar chime rang out, a sound that had once filled Ethan with pride every time he heard it. The smell of machine oil, freshly cut wood, paint, and metal mixed in the air. pulling him back to the early, grueling days when he had personally arranged every shelf and unpacked every crate. But the warmth of those memories was quickly replaced by something else, something unsettling, as if he were walking into a carefully constructed illusion meant to deceive him. Inside, everything looked almost unnaturally perfect. The shelves were meticulously organized, price tags perfectly aligned, and employees greeted customers with polite, practiced smiles. Clara Hayes, the long-time cashier whom Ethan had once considered his right hand, stood at the main counter, her serious gaze fixed on instructing a younger employee on how to handle invoices. Ryan Brooks, a sales associate who had been with the company for over a decade, stood by the power tools section, grinning as he enthusiastically explained product details to a middle-aged customer. It was a picture-perfect scene, designed to impress anyone walking in. But to Ethan, it felt wrong. He knew exactly how a genuine hardware store operated. Busy, orderly, yes, but never this flawless. Ethan moved slowly through the aisles, pretending to examine boxes of tools like any regular customer would. But his sharp eyes took in every detail. He noticed how Clara would occasionally glance quickly up at the ceiling camera before adjusting the stack of invoices in front of her, or how Ryan's eyes darted briefly toward the cash register before looking away again, movements so subtle that anyone not watching closely would have missed them. These were not the natural actions of people with nothing to hide. Ethan's hand tightened inside the pocket of his jacket, his heart beating harder than usual. He was standing in his own store, yet he felt like a stranger trespassing in a place controlled by someone else. And in that moment, a cold thought slipped into his mind. Could it be that the very faces he had trusted for years were hiding something far worse than he had ever imagined? Ethan moved deeper into the store, the familiar sounds of barcode scanners and polite greetings echoing rhythmically, like a carefully programmed symphony. He stopped in front of the mechanical tools section, pretending to examine a set of wrenches, but in truth, his eyes were discreetly observing everyone around him. A young worker nearby glanced at Ethan briefly, his eyes full of caution, before quickly bending down to rearrange boxes of screws as if afraid of being caught staring. That level of wariness was far too unusual for an ordinary customer. Ethan continued to move slowly, each step heavy with suspicion. He noticed Clara speaking with another employee at the counter, her voice lower than usual, almost a whisper. They exchanged words quickly, then Clara shot a glance toward the camera mounted in the corner before stepping over to the next counter. The gesture was fleeting, but to Ethan it was unmistakable. Someone was deliberately trying to avoid the surveillance system, the very system he had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars installing. Another detail made Ethan even more uneasy. Ryan, with his ever-present friendly smile, carried an expression that seemed calculating whenever no customers were nearby. At one point, Ethan caught Ryan exchanging a glance with Clara, a look so quick it could have been missed by anyone else. And yet, they both turned away at the same moment, as if some invisible thread connected them through signals only they could understand. Ethan tilted his head slightly, pretending to crouch to check the price of a hammer, but his real attention was on another employee. The young man was scribbling something on a small piece of paper, then subtly slipped it into his pocket before heading towards the cash register. Every movement was smooth, natural even. But to Ethan, a man who had spent his life observing how employees operated, those actions flashed like warning lights in the dark, signaling a truth being carefully concealed. The air in the store suddenly felt suffocating to Ethan. Every smile, every cheerful greeting now seemed like a mask worn to hide something far deeper. He couldn't help but wonder, was everything running so smoothly because these people had learned how to put on a perfect performance in front of customers? The thought weighed heavily on his chest, pushing him further, urging him to keep watching, to keep listening, and to witness everything with his own eyes. That moment came faster than Ethan expected. He stood near the checkout counter, pretending to carefully compare the prices of a screwdriver set. From this position, he could clearly hear the conversation happening at the register. Ryan was speaking with a familiar customer, a middle-aged man Ethan recognized instantly. Tommy Reed, a frequent buyer who often purchased large batches of tools for construction projects. Ryan lowered his voice, but not enough to escape Ethan's sharpened ears. "Don't worry, the good prices are only for people who know how to play along. Old man Grayson just sits around counting money all day. He never checks the system." Those words hit Ethan like a cold blade straight to the chest. Old man Grayson, that was him. The man who once helped Ryan pay his mother's hospital bills. The man who sent gifts to Ryan's house every Christmas. And yet now, his name was spoken with disdain, as if he were nothing more than a greedy old man, sitting on piles of cash, oblivious to what was happening under his own roof. Ethan forced himself to stay calm, though his heart pounded heavily in his chest. He watched Ryan's hands move over the computer screen, a set of power tools priced at over $450, with just a few taps, dropped to $140. Tommy chuckled quietly, pulling out his wallet as he winked at Ryan. "Thanks, man. Next time, I'll bring a few friends. We can all benefit from this." Ryan smiled knowingly. "Bring them along. Thursday still has some good slots open." Ethan stood frozen, as if rooted to the ground. This wasn't just financial fraud. It was a blatant betrayal, a slap in the face to the trust he had given them. But he held back, refusing to reveal himself now. If Ryan dared to do this so openly in front of customers, what else was happening behind the scenes that was far worse, hidden from sight? Ethan quietly shifted closer to the aisle near the checkout counter, pretending to examine a box of screws. But his eyes never left Ryan's every move. In just 10 minutes, he witnessed 2 more transactions executed with the same trick. The price on the screen initially displayed a high value, then suddenly dropped to an unusually low number after just a few quick, practiced taps. Every customer who received this special deal shared the same reaction. They smiled, nodded, and left with farewell remarks laced with unspoken agreement, like participants in a secret arrangement. The tension rose when Monica Hill, a long-time customer Ethan knew well, appeared. She often purchased expensive batches for manufacturing workshops, and he had always wondered why recent reports showed sales volume remaining high while profits from customers like Monica were almost negligible. Now he understood. Ryan smiled easily, working the register swiftly as he spoke in a low voice, just loud enough for Monica to hear. "Same old price. We've known each other for a long time. You know the rules." Monica smiled, placing a hand on Ryan's shoulder in gratitude. "You're a lifesaver. I'll send more customers your way." At that moment, Clara walked over, holding a steaming cup of coffee. She leaned casually against the counter, her voice low, but Ethan caught every word clearly. "Don't do it back to back, Ryan. The system will flag it. At least 10 minutes between big transactions. Remember, don't get greedy. We need this to last." Her tone was calm and measured, as if giving instructions for a routine task. Ryan nodded with a knowing while completely unfazed. Ethan felt the heat rise to his face. Clara, the woman he had trusted with managing the financial systems of this branch, the one who had helped him build the first security protocols, was now using that very knowledge to hide fraud. Her eyes were cold, her confidence unsettling. This wasn't a careless employee trying to pocket a little extra on the side. She was a ringleader, orchestrating an organized network of deceit. Ethan forced himself to stay calm, maintaining the appearance of just another ordinary customer. But in situ, he knew what he had just seen was only the surface. If Clara was bold enough to speak so openly in front of others, there had to be more players involved, and they had been doing this long enough to believe no one would ever catch them. Ethan moved toward the back of the store, to a secluded corner near the power tools section where few people passed by. He quietly pulled out his phone and opened the internal management app, the very system he had personally required for all branches, a system Clara herself had proposed to him 2 years ago. The screen lit up, displaying real-time transaction reports. He scrolled quickly through the list and immediately spotted irregularities. Dozens of discounted transactions were logged under labels such as "Loyal Customer Discount" or "Defective Items for Clearance," all clustered in the same time frames, mid-morning and late afternoon, precisely the hours Ryan usually worked at the counter. When he filtered by employee ID, nearly every suspicious transaction was executed by Ryan, and Clara was consistently the one approving them on the system just minutes later. Ethan's brow furrowed as he switched to the inventory report. A string of suspicious adjustments jumped out at him. High-value items like power drills, lithium battery packs, and tile cutters were all marked as damaged or returned, less than 24 hours after being sold. Even worse, Clara was the one who had signed off on every one of those reports. Then one detail froze him in place. A brand new transaction had just been updated exactly 3 minutes ago. A power drill valued at nearly $300 had been sold for only $70, marked as a loyal customer discount. And he had just watched the customer walk out the door, grinning from ear to ear. Ethan tightened his grip on the phone, his breathing growing heavier. This was no longer suspicion. This was undeniable proof, and it confirmed one thing. They weren't just skimming a little on the side, they were running an entire theft operation, calculated and deliberate, right under his nose. The next morning, the sky was clear, and sunlight streamed through the large glass windows of Grayson Tools, greeting the day as usual. But none of the employees inside knew that today would change everything. At exactly 8 o'clock, the glass door opened, and Ethan Grayson walked in, not in the dusty work clothes from the day before, but in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and a navy blue tie. His eyes were cold, his steps deliberate, and the moment he crossed the threshold, a wave of tension rippled through the store. Employees looked up, their eyes filled with uncertainty, especially when they noticed the discreet Grayson logo embroidered on his suit jacket, a detail reserved only for the highest-level executives. Clara, standing at the cashier's counter, froze, her fingers halting on the keyboard. Ryan, arranging power tools at the far end of the counter, looked up with a forced smile, but the flicker of panic in his eyes betrayed him as Ethan approached. Ethan said nothing until he entered the small meeting office at the back of the store. He placed a leather briefcase on the table, sat in the chairman's seat, and calmly unlocked it. Each employee was called in one by one, and no one dared to question why. Clara was the first to enter, trying to keep her composure, followed by Ryan, and then 3 other employees who had worked the previous shift. The air was so thick with tension that the ticking of the clock on the wall seemed deafening. Ethan opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents, neatly clipped, with detailed transaction records, security camera images, and system-generated reports. He placed the stack on the table and slid it toward Clara, his voice low and as cold as steel. Does anyone here want to explain why a $300 power drill was sold for $70 and marked as a loyal customer discount? Or why lithium battery packs keep getting reported as defective right after being sold, when I have clear footage showing them being handed straight to customers? Clara tightened her grip on her coffee cup, but said nothing. Ethan turned to Ryan. You think I didn't hear what you said yesterday, Ryan? What did you call me? An old man counting money who never checks the system? Do you want to repeat that now? Ryan lowered his gaze, his face flushed, but there was still a trace of defiance in his eyes. The room was silent except for the sound of paper as Ethan flipped through the pages. I'm not relying on feelings. This is evidence. Here is the full list of suspicious transactions from the past 3 months, all approved under Clara's signature. And this, he pulled out a printed screenshot, is the exact timestamp showing the system accessed under your management account, Clara, to delete security camera footage at the cashier's counter yesterday. Clara's face went pale, and the sharp confidence she usually carried dissolved into visible unease. A moment of silence passed before a trembling voice broke it. It was Jake, the youngest employee, who had only been with the store for a few months. I'm sorry. I just did what I was told. They said I'd lose my job if I said anything. Ethan looked directly at him, his expression softening slightly, before turning back to Clara and Ryan. His voice grew harder, sharper than ever. You didn't just steal money. You stole trust. I treated you like family, and you betrayed me in the very place I built with my own hands. Clara opened her mouth, scrambling for justification. We just wanted to help customers. Prices are too high now, and many people can't afford. Ethan cut her off with a sharp slam of his hand on the table, making the stack of documents tremble. Don't disguise greed as kindness. This isn't helping anyone. This is theft. You turned this store into a black market, and me into a fool who trusted you. Each word sliced through the suffocating air like a blade. And everyone in the room knew this confrontation was only the beginning of what was yet to come. The small meeting room at Grayson Tools was silent, as if every sound from outside had been shut out. Ethan Grayson sat upright, his sharp gaze sweeping across the bowed heads around the table. He took a deep breath, then slowly set his pen down on the thick stack of files, his voice deep and steady, as if delivering a verdict. I spent my entire life building this store on trust and honesty, but instead of preserving it, You turned it into a tool for your own greed. Today, that ends. Ethan's eyes shifted to Jake, the young employee trembling at the far end of the table. His gaze softened slightly, his tone firm but not harsh. You're young, and I know you were pulled into this. You're naive, but that doesn't excuse you. You're suspended for 2 weeks and will undergo 6 months of ethics training. One more mistake, and you won't have a place here. Jake nodded quickly, his eyes glistening with tears. Thank you, sir. I promise I'll change. Ethan then turned to Julie, who had remained silent throughout the meeting. Julie, you didn't directly commit fraud, but you knew about it and chose to stay quiet. You'll be suspended for 1 month. When you return, you'll oversee the new monitoring system yourself. You'll have to prove you deserve to stay here. Julie looked up, guilt written on her face, and nodded softly. I understand, sir. Then Ethan stood, stepping closer to the table, his gaze like daggers as he locked eyes with Ryan. His voice dropped to an icy tone. Ryan Brooks, you didn't just steal. You recruited others into this scheme, and you even mocked me in front of customers. You're done here. You're terminated immediately, and the losses you caused will be deducted from your final paycheck. Ryan clenched his fists, his face flushed, but he said nothing and lowered his head. Finally, Ethan turned to Clara Hayes. The room felt as though it had stopped breathing as their eyes met. Clara tried to maintain her composure, but her hands trembled slightly against the table. Ethan spoke slowly, each word heavy as stone. Clara, you were the one I trusted most. You knew exactly how this system worked, and you used that knowledge to manipulate records, erase evidence, and lead an organized theft. This isn't just a violation of policy. This is a crime. I can't overlook this. He paused for a moment, then delivered the final blow. As of this moment, you are terminated, and I'm forwarding every piece of evidence to the authorities. You will answer for this in court. Clara's face went pale, her lips trembling as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out. As everyone quietly left the room, Ethan remained, staring out the wide office window. He saw employees working outside. Some had already heard whispers of what happened and looked at him differently now. No longer with casual indifference, but with the gaze of people who had just witnessed a necessary reckoning. That afternoon, Ethan gathered all remaining staff. He stood in front of the main counter, his voice clear and resolute. Starting today, this store will change. We'll install cloud-based security cameras, conduct weekly random audits, and monitor every transaction closely. But more importantly, we will rebuild the most valuable thing we have: trust. Anyone who wants to stay will have to prove they deserve it. Many faces looked back at him with admiration mixed with determination. A few loyal customers standing nearby overheard and nodded approvingly. 6 months later, the latest financial reports showed stable revenue and profits back on track. More importantly, no suspicious transactions appeared. Young employees like Jake had grown more professional, and Julie had become one of the most diligent supervisors. Customers returned in greater numbers, trusting the store once again. Ethan stood at the counter, gazing out through the large glass window at the bustling street. The afternoon sunlight highlighted his face, showing not just determination, but a sense of calm relief. In his heart, he thought, trust once broken will never be whole again. But at least I can rebuild it, piece by piece, with truth and resolve. And he knew this was the greatest victory of his life. In business, trust is the most valuable asset. You can earn back lost money. But once trust collapses, everything falls apart. What truly matters is not just catching those who betray you, but building a transparent system where no one ever gets the chance to. If you agree that honesty is the greatest strength, hit like to support these values. Subscribe so you won't miss more meaningful stories. And comment right below this video with 3 words. Keep the trust, because that is what creates real sustainability.